The restaurant fell silent as Mark blew out the single candle on his cake, the soft glow illuminating the empty chairs surrounding him. What the other diners couldn't see were the 3 pairs of eyes watching from behind the potted plant near the entrance, or the whispered plan that would change everything: pretend you're our mom. If you've ever felt the weight of loneliness or witnessed an act of pure love that restored your faith in humanity, this story will touch your heart. Like and subscribe to see more stories that remind us of the extraordinary connections that save us when we need it most. Mark Jensen never imagined he'd be celebrating his 40th birthday alone in a corner booth at Rosario's Italian restaurant. 3 years ago, his life had been complete: a loving wife, 3 beautiful 6-year-old daughters, and a home filled with laughter. Now, the house echoed with absence, and he struggled daily to fill the void Emma had left when cancer took her far too soon. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" The waitress, Sophia according to her name tag, smiled sympathetically at the single candle flickering on the small chocolate cake. Her eyes darted to the empty seats around him. "No, thank you. Just the check whenever you're ready." Mark forced a smile, feeling the familiar tightness in his throat. He'd chosen Rosario's because it had been Emma's favorite, a tradition they'd maintained for every birthday and anniversary. Coming alone felt both painful and necessary, a way to honor her memory while acknowledging the reality of his new life. What Mark didn't know was that his daughters, Lily, Rose, and Violet, had other plans. The identical triplets had watched their father grow quieter in the weeks leading up to his birthday. They'd seen him staring at old photographs late at night when he thought they were asleep. They'd noticed how he tried to make their lives as normal as possible while neglecting his own happiness. "Daddy looks so sad," Lily whispered from their hiding spot. The girls had convinced their neighbor Mrs. Patel to drive them to the restaurant, telling her they wanted to surprise their father. What they hadn't mentioned was the elaborate plan they'd concocted after overhearing Mark decline birthday invitations from coworkers and friends. "Remember what we practiced," Rose reminded her sisters, clutching the handmade card they'd created together. Violet, always the most daring of the 3, nodded decisively. "It's time." Mark was just about to blow out his candle when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He turned to find Sophia, the waitress, standing beside his table. She'd removed her apron and let her dark hair down. Something about her smile seemed different, warmer, more personal. "I'm sorry?" Mark asked, confused by the sudden change in her demeanor. "I hope you don't mind," she continued, sliding into the booth across from him. "I saw you sitting alone and thought you might like some company on your birthday." Before Mark could respond, 3 small figures emerged from behind a nearby plant and rushed toward the table. "Surprise, Daddy," the triplets shouted in unison, climbing into the booth beside him and across from him, surrounding him with their presence. "Girls? What are you? How did you get here?" Mark looked around in confusion, spotting Mrs. Patel waving from near the entrance. Lily leaned in close to his ear. "We have a surprise for you, Daddy. We asked the nice lady to pretend to be our mom for your birthday dinner." Mark's eyes widened as he looked at Sophia, who now appeared equally surprised. "I'm so sorry," he began, mortified. "My daughters apparently." "We told her you were the nicest daddy in the world," Rose interrupted, "but that you're always sad on your birthday because mommy's in heaven. And we thought maybe you wouldn't be sad if you had someone to blow out the candle with," Violet added matter-of-factly. Sophia's professional smile had transformed into something more genuine, a mixture of compassion and amusement. "Your daughters are very persuasive," she said. "They've been planning this for weeks, apparently. They came in last Saturday with their neighbor to scope out the restaurant and talk to the manager." Mark was speechless, looking from his daughters to the waitress and back again. "We know she's not really mommy," Lily said softly, her small hand finding his. "But we thought maybe you could pretend, just for tonight." The simple honesty of his daughter's words broke something open inside Mark. For 3 years, he'd been trying to be both mother and father to his girls, never allowing himself to acknowledge how much he missed having someone to share the burden, and the joy, of raising them. I don't want to intrude on your family moment, Sophia said gently, beginning to rise. Please stay, Mark found himself saying. If you don't mind. It would mean a lot to the girls. And to me, he didn't add. What followed was the most unexpected birthday dinner of Mark's life. The triplets eagerly filled the conversation with stories about school and friends, while Sophia listened attentively, asking questions and laughing at their animated tales. Mark watched in amazement as his daughters bloomed under her attention, realizing how much they'd missed having a maternal figure in their lives. Daddy's a terrible braider, Violet confided to Sophia. Our hair always looks like bird nests. That's not true, Mark protested with a laugh. It's more like, slightly disheveled bird nests. With very confused birds, Rose added, sending everyone at the table into fits of laughter. As the evening progressed, Mark found himself relaxing for the first time in years. There was something about Sophia's easy manner and genuine interest in his daughters that put him at ease. She wasn't trying to replace Emma, no one could, but her presence filled a space that had been empty for too long. When the dessert arrived, a proper birthday cake this time, courtesy of the restaurant manager who'd been in on the girls' plan, Mark found himself surrounded by not just his daughters but other diners who'd been touched by the scene unfolding at their table. They sang, "Happy Birthday," together, and for once, the absence of Emma's voice didn't overshadow the moment. "Make a wish, Daddy," the triplets urged as he prepared to blow out the candles. Mark closed his eyes, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and hope. For 3 years, his only wish had been for Emma to somehow return, an impossible desire born of grief. But tonight, looking at his daughters' expectant faces and feeling the warmth of community around him, he wished for something different, the courage to move forward without forgetting the past. As the candles went out, Sophia caught his eye across the table. "Your wife must have been extraordinary," she said quietly, "to have left such an amazing legacy in these 3. The simple acknowledgement of Emma, not as a painful absence but as a continuing presence in their daughters, touched Mark deeply. "She was," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "She would have loved seeing them like this." After the cake had been eaten and the bill settled, with Sophia insisting that Mark's meal was on the house, the evening drew to a close. The triplets, exhausted from the excitement and well past their bedtime, were beginning to yawn. "I should get them home," Mark said, gathering their coats. Sophia nodded, helping Rose with her buttons. "They're remarkable children. You're doing an amazing job with them." "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping up," Mark admitted. "That's parenting," Sophia replied with a knowing smile. "My mom raised 4 of us on her own after my dad left. She always said the secret was pretending she knew what she was doing until eventually she did." As they prepared to leave, Lily tugged on Sophia's sleeve. "Will you come to our house sometime? You could teach Daddy how to braid hair properly." Mark began to apologize, but Sophia just smiled. "I'd like that, if your dad doesn't mind." The look that passed between them held no pressure, no expectations, just the possibility of connection. Outside the restaurant, Mrs. Patel was waiting to drive the girls home. As Mark helped them into the car, Sophia handed him a folded piece of paper. "My number," she explained. "Not for dating or anything complicated. Just if the girls need help with those braids. Or if you ever want to talk to someone who understands a little about what it's like to be part of a family that's finding its way after loss." Mark accepted the paper, feeling a weight lift that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Thank you. For everything tonight." "Thank your daughters," Sophia replied. "They're the ones who reminded me why I love working here, to be part of moments that matter." As they drove home, the triplets fell asleep in the back seat, their mission accomplished. Mark glanced at them in the rearview mirror, these 3 miracles who looked so much like their mother but who were becoming their own unique selves day by day. For the first time in 3 years, his birthday hadn't been a day to endure but one to remember. His daughters had given him the greatest gift possible, permission to find joy again, to accept help, to acknowledge that their family wasn't broken, just changed. The house was quiet when they arrived home. Mark carried each sleeping girl to bed, tucking them in with whispered thanks and kisses on foreheads. In the stillness afterward, he sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the paper Sophia had given him. Below her phone number, she'd written, "Every family has its own story. Yours isn't over, it's just turning the page." Mark ran his fingers over the words, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not the sharp pain of grief that had been his constant companion, but something gentler, the quiet recognition that healing wasn't about leaving Emma behind but about carrying her forward differently. He took out his phone and added Sophia's number to his contacts. Not because he was ready for a new relationship, he might never be, but because tonight had shown him that isolation wasn't the tribute to Emma's memory that he'd thought it was. The real tribute was in raising their daughters to be the kind of people who would orchestrate an elaborate birthday surprise because they couldn't bear to see someone they loved suffering alone. The kind of people who understood that family could be both what you're born with and what you create along the way. As Mark finally headed to bed, he paused at the family photo that hung in the hallway, Emma holding newborn triplets, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "They're amazing, Em," he whispered. "You'd be so proud." And for the first time, the silence that answered him didn't feel empty. It felt like permission. The following weeks brought subtle changes to the Jensen household. Mark found himself reaching out to friends he'd been avoiding, accepting dinner invitations, and even hosting a small gathering for the girls' classmates. The triplets watched these developments with satisfaction, exchanging knowing glances whenever their father laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Sophia became an occasional visitor, first coming over to demonstrate proper hair braiding techniques as promised, then staying for dinner or movie nights. Her presence was uncomplicated, a friend to Mark, a mentor to the girls, someone who understood boundaries and grief and the messy process of rebuilding. 6 months after that birthday dinner, Mark stood in the doorway of the living room, watching as Sophia helped the triplets with a science project. Their heads were bent together over a model of the solar system, Sophia patiently explaining why Neptune couldn't possibly be pink despite Violet's artistic preferences. "But it's so far away," Violet argued. "How does anyone really know what color it is?" "Telescopes and spacecraft have taken pictures," Sophia explained. "Maybe it changes colors when no one's looking," Rose suggested, always the dreamer. "Like a cosmic chameleon," Lily added, making everyone laugh. The sound of their laughter, his daughter's familiar giggles blending with Sophia's warm chuckle, filled the house with something that had been missing for too long. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new harmony built from both memory and possibility. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and Sophia had gone home, Mark found himself looking at old videos of Emma. Instead of the usual pain, he felt a profound gratitude for the time they'd had and the 3 remarkable girls they'd created together. "They found a way forward," he told her image on the screen. "They're showing me how." On Mark's next birthday, there was no need for elaborate plans or pretending. The table at Rosario's was full, his daughters, friends, even Emma's parents who had flown in for the occasion. And Sophia, no longer a waitress but a graduate student pursuing her teaching degree, sat beside him not as a stand-in but as herself, someone who had become important in her own right. As he looked around at the faces of those he loved, Mark realized that grief hadn't diminished. It had transformed, becoming part of a larger story rather than the whole narrative. Emma would always be the great love of his past, the mother of his children, an irreplaceable presence in their family history. But the future, that was still being written, one day at a time, by 3 determined little girls who had refused to let their father celebrate alone, and by the man who had finally learned that honoring what was lost meant embracing what remained. When the candles were lit on this birthday, Mark didn't hesitate before making his wish. This time, it wasn't about what he had lost but about what he had found, the courage to live fully, to parent bravely, and to open his heart to the unexpected gifts that come even in the aftermath of great loss. And as the flames flickered out to the sound of cheers and laughter, he knew with certainty that this was exactly what Emma would have wished for him too.